Welcome to Hero or Disruptor, exploring the power of teaching metaphors. I'm Garth Neufeld. In this series, Jane Hallinan and I take a deep dive into the hero's journey as applied to teaching, while also considering the transformational power of disruption. So where will you see yourself? As a guide to the next generation of heroes? Or as a disruptor of the status quo? Wherever you find yourself, thanks for joining us on this journey. Jane, you kind of wanted to be in the driver's seat for this episode, and I'm quite happy having Jane Hallinan in the driver's seat. So let me just buckle in here.
Well, it's good that you say that because part of my style of management is that I usually push people out of the driver's seat and take the seat. And so I'm well known for my field commander approach.
Well, yeah, because you're always just trying to destabilize people, students, right?
Who knows? Yeah, so I'm happy to take the lead here. I think what we had agreed to talk about was the fascination that you have with the framework of story branding.
Yep.
And so since the last time we talked, I've done a little homework on it and looked at materials that you sent and, did a little Googling.
Wow.
And I thought it might be important for further conversations to talk a little bit about what drew you to this approach and what you see as the appeal before we get very much deeper into that. Because I think for you, it's clearly a powerful metaphor, but I have to say it's also inspired me to think in a slightly different direction. So I hope we'll save some time at the end to go in that different direction.
Yeah. Well, let me just start by saying one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation is because I don't quite have it dialed in yet exactly what it means to me. And it's a good thing you are a clinician because this is going to feel a lot like therapy. No, it's what drew me to StoryBrand and their model is in part the clarity around it, because it's very simple. It says, be explicit, be transparent. And I've seen these things come up in higher education recently, like a big move back toward this for the first time, which is that students do better with transparency, be transparent, have other, like the tilt model teaching, I won't say it now.
I won't be able to come up with the acronym either, but it certainly emphasizes, transparency.
In learning,
students do better when they know what it is you expect.
Right. And so everything, when things kind of in a sort of synchronous way, you're hearing this everywhere. I felt like I was just picking up on this from many different places, that transparency is a great way to move forward. For example, I run a nonprofit and we fundraise quite a lot. And if you don't have a transparent message for donors, you don't give them a reason to give to what you're doing, right? If it's all over that's why people do elevator speeches or whatever. So I think the transparency and clarity was the first thing, but also the reason why people are drawn to or when people are drawn to a transparent message is when that message connects with them. And so they set up this pattern of story that humans really respond to. That's the case they make. That is very predictable. If you watch a movie in the first 5 minutes, you will know what the lead character desires, and you will watch them go through challenge and try to get it. And it goes, their philosophy. It goes that anybody in kind of any situation is sort of like that. And so I started applying it around, and I was wondering, does it apply to teaching? And I think it does. And so,
okay, so let me ask you the historical question of how did you encounter story branding specifically? Where did it pop up? When did it come on your desktop?
It came through a friend.
Okay.
I'm well aware of the author Donald Miller. 30 years ago, wrote a novel called Blue Like Jazz, and so it, a lot of people I knew were reading it around that time. And so kind of lost track of him, but that's his background is that he's an author. So yeah. And then we're kind of, a friend said, Donald Miller's back at it. Look, but he's doing business now. Look what he's come up with. So that was it.
Okay. And could you use the phrase elevator speech? Could you give an elevator speech summary of what you think the essence of story branding really is?
Okay. And we're moving a little away from the hero thing to story branding, but story branding is communicating as clearly as you can the reason why someone should join you on some sort of mission. It's calling somebody out to do something, a call to action that will benefit them, where they are the center of the story. Okay. Yep.
All right. So then could you give an example, and maybe your nonprofit might be the most interesting because it's so different from most teachers' experience that might set the stage. How did that shape your planning for that particular quest?
Yeah. Well, it's gone through iterations, but I'll tell you one. A couple of years ago, and I was well into our nonprofit is called Shared Space for All, and that's sharedspaceforall.org. And I had gone through a lot of iterations of website and kind of how we speak about this to donors and coming up with, mission, vision, the things that good nonprofits do. And then one day this line came to me, and it was, do something good in the world. And this was around the time, I don't think the pandemic had started, but definitely we were like in a political time where it was kind of chaos in our country and everyday negative news. And I thought, man, people are they need to resonate with something that calls them to be active, to do something greater than what they are surrounded by right now. And so I thought do something good in the world would be one of those things that would capture people. And they'd say, I'm a person who wants to do something good in the world. What are you guys doing? And can I help?
And you've been pretty successful at that, I think.
Yeah, we do. We're growing slowly by slowly. I mean, we're 5 years in, and we do work. So the elevator pitch for Shared Space for All is that we mentor and educate the most at-risk children in Thailand who are kind of being lured into prostitution and kind of slave labor sorts of things. And so that's the work that we do out there.
Okay. And just in case any listener feels like they want to join that movement, that website for donation is what again?
Yeah. www.sharedspaceforall.org.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So you use story branding as a way of fleshing out, making things explicit. And therein lies the secret of that approach, is that it's different than the traditional way people might get an idea and bumble along.
Yep, that's exactly it. And it's really with the audience in mind. Like, how do I say this in a way that is going to be clear for my audience where they can get on board?
Okay. All right. Well, then let's transition to the big idea that you have, which is whether or not the heroic journey would speak to people. Talk a little bit about what was going on when you came up with that idea, when your muse visited and dropped that one on you.
Yeah. I have when I got trained as a counselor, I was really drawn to Jungian therapy and theory. And so, not everything about it, but definitely this kind of these archetypes, myth, these patterns of story really have always resonated with me. I haven't practiced in a long time, and I don't know that I've really thought about that too explicitly. But again, there were some things that were converging for me at that time when this really connected. And I think it was this aha moment where it may not be scientifically true, but it's true. And it really it resonated with me deeply. And then if you are part of Story Brand, you can go and see you can go and work through some ideas you have, and it will walk you through this hero's journey. And when I saw that, my goodness, it applies to running a nonprofit, and it applies to teaching, and it applies to your life's goals as well, in the way that you see, different things that you are involved in or called to, or however you want to say it. That's when it kind of lit on fire for me. And I thought that likely it is true. Likely people will resonate with it, and that I might not be alone.
Okay. And what was it in particular? Oh, one other question based on what we talked about last time. You mentioned that Joseph Campbell's work has been influential in how you think about this. And it occurred to me that not everybody's going to know what Joseph Campbell's work is about. So can you also mention a little bit about the nature of his work and why it spoke to you? Well,
and I'll tell you what, I don't know Joseph. I know Joseph Campbell in that I've read up on him a little bit, and I've read some of his perspectives on myth and story. And so I wouldn't say that I am the kind of the guru on Joseph Campbell, but this is a person with a literature background, and I believe a psychology background as well, although don't quote me on that. And here's a person who was probably one. He definitely wasn't the first person to see the power of myth in people's lives, but he was one of the people who made it popular, and who others, an author. There's a great documentary on Netflix I think it's called The Power of Myth, where it's all about Joseph Campbell and kind of this idea.
Okay,
it's been a long time, but yeah,
that's helpful. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what do you see as heroic in teaching? I only ask really hard questions.
It's a great question. I know. How am I doing so far?
So far, good.
Good. What is heroic about teaching? I feel like you would have a quicker answer than I will about this. I think what's heroic about anything, so I'm not sidestepping, I just think what's heroic about anything is authenticity, is like finding your authentic calling in it, and listening, and then putting your energies into that. And so for teaching, whatever it is, and I think there's many things that can get people going. And this is one of the places I got stuck, because for you, I know, and for most teachers, there's a student, there's probably a pie chart, right, of things that can inspire us about teaching that are heroic. So for example, mentoring students in some ways can be heroic. Teaching psychology specifically, I think, can be heroic, because, and for me, it's about, in some ways, doing something good in the world, because we can kind of pass that along to students and they can make positive changes. I think also teaching, being a professor, there's something about bureaucracy and being part of an institution and having to get along with people. And there are heroic things that some of us do every day, not to blow it all up, to move forward, in a positive way. So yeah, I think I think about multiple kind of heroic things related to teaching.
Well, the irony is one of the courses that I regularly teach is positive psychology. And next week, we do courage. Mm-hmm. And so I took a look at the normal kinds of things that we talk about connected with courage. My students take the values in action inventory and see where they stand in relation to all the virtues and characteristics that Peterson and Seligman highlighted in that instrument. And so I noted that when we're talking about courage as a virtue, the things that they said constituted that, and it resonates with what you just said, is valor, taking action when you're facing some sort of danger or dragon, being authentic, which they suggested was a simple matter of being sincere, enthusiasm for what you do and being vital in response to your obligations, and then industry/perseverance, so that you are able to ride out those difficult moments, knowing that at some point things will resolve if you just keep at it. And so those elements fit really well with what you're talking about as heroism in the classroom, I think.
Yeah, now I think about students. When you list those things, that's my hope for students, is that students would get those, would accomplish those, would find, whenever our students face so many challenges. So do our colleagues, and so do we. But our students are facing unique challenges in this day and age, for sure. If they can leave the classroom with some of those things you just mentioned, they have started the hero's journey themselves, because they are essentially taking on foes. There's a ton at risk. They are, a lot of them, in a vulnerable position, and it takes courage to go ahead and get that degree, or to sacrifice for that education.
Well, and to balance their lives in a way that they can manage working, taking care of families, the kind of extra burdens that students have today that my generation didn't have. We had some luxury of most of us, of going to college and being able to study and maybe have a part-time job, but that just simply doesn't correspond to the experience of most students in contemporary life.
Yeah.
So I would agree. And I think therein lies one of the interesting things, that if we're talking about working with teachers to recognize the heroism that they have, that there's a kind of meta thing going on here. Yes. That you're working with teachers to help them recognize those abilities so that those can be transferred and encouraged in students. And so that makes it a little bit more complicated, I think.
It does. When we did Top Inc., Teaching of Psychology Incubator, at the annual conference on teaching, folks,
which seems like about 10 years ago. I know it wasn't that long ago, but.
And yes. By the way, that was totally story branded. I think I've mentioned that before. Mm-hmm. That whole thing was. And then you're just walking people through their ideas. One of the early things that we had to do with folks is they said, I wanted to do this and this and this. And we had said, no, you got to go one thing and choose one audience. And this is where you and I are right now, is we're at a fork in the road where it's like, do we want to talk about students or do we want to talk about teachers? But you've got to pick your audience.
Maybe.
Okay. You think with a little nuance, you can kind of.
I do. And I think while I don't know if we're ready to quite get away from developing heroism yet, the word that has been sticking with me following our conversation is transformation.
Yeah.
That in fact, we're talking the target. If we're talking about teacher training, we're talking to people who themselves as teachers wish to transform to be more effective, that they wish to, whether that's to shed their imposter costume, or they just want to improve, or they want to earn teaching awards, or whatever the motive is, that they are interested in being different than they are at the point where they encounter. And that mirror reflects the struggle that we have with students, because if you are a transformative teacher, your goal is to make that student into a different person from the contact that they've had with you. So I think that the transformation is a kind of mirror image piece. And at least when you're working with the teachers, if they're listening to you, they're already halfway there. They're eager for the change. When you're working with students, not so much. Some are. They're there for the transformation and they're thrilled. But I'm not going to say the majority of students think that's what they're getting when they sign up for college.
That's really interesting. It makes me think that some heroes need to be called to their heroic journey, and aren't ready yet. or just haven't realized it yet. I also am thinking about folks in early and mid career and how that's a little maybe different than folks who are in mid to late career. There is a character in the heroic story. There is a guide that always shows up, right? And it doesn't matter what story you take, Star Wars or what's the Katniss movie? Oh, well, people will know what I'm talking about. But yes. It does, like, whatever heroic person, and it could be anyone. It could be, I don't know, Jerry Maguire probably had one too. But it is okay. It's a guide. It's somebody who is going to show them a way through this very difficult time. And it's interesting. We are simultaneously, I think, up until we get to that mid-late career, and I'm not saying that learning stops, but we are simultaneously guiding younger colleagues, but also students, and still on our heroic journey.
Sure.
Or the way that Carl Jung said it, maybe, is that maybe it was something like this. In the two halves of life, we spend the first half of life on the heroic journey, and then it's like writing the book. And then the second half of life is commentary on the book that you've written. And so there is this reflective piece where you are now ready to enter somebody else's journey as a guide. And maybe that's what is Erickson's? You said it before. The giving back stage in human development.
Sure. Yeah. Generativity.
Yep. Generativity. Yep. That's it. Yep.
Well, I hate to disagree with Jung. No, I don't. I disagree with Jung because I think part of the transactional nature of what we do is that you can, by entering into a mentoring relationship as the mentee, which is an awful word.
Terrible word.
Or the mentor, that mutual relationship, if that's done right, that's really beneficial. And the mentor, presumably later in career, is going to learn some potentially transformative things from the person being mentored. So I don't think it quite neatly boils down to, you're trying to manage the journey in the first half, and then in the second half, you're reflective about it.
You're right. You're right. And yeah. it would.
Oh, good.
I think that it kind of takes away that metaphor, and it's all metaphor, right? But that metaphor, I think it's kind of offensive to people who are in the second half of their life who are, okay, so I'm done now. I've got nothing left to accomplish. I don't have any goals. I'm not inspired. I'm not trying to do difficult things, right?
Well, it also lets them off the hook. I mean, let's face it. If you and it kind of parallels what happens if you're tenured. Can you just put your feet up on your desk and harass your younger colleagues and say, it's your turn to do all the heavy lifting? No, I think
one of the first talks I ever heard you give, you talked about that you don't like this idea of the sage on the stage, that we get to this point where we know everything and we're just here to talk to you about it.
Well, and I've always had a bit of a problem with the talking head professor who takes the same set of notes in semester after semester and does what they do and then go back to their office, and they may not want questions because that would be disruptive. Because I think they're not only shortchanging the students, they're shortchanging themselves, because how transformative it feels when you can fully engage students in that conversation. And so I think that's why the guide, sage on the stage, guide on the side, the guide on the side model is definitely something that is going to be more satisfying for students and more satisfying for the teacher who's willing to see the journey as one of transformation that doesn't have an endpoint.
Yeah. Yep. Well, as you know, I have to run here.
I know.
Now, I feel like I want to put this out here and then we'll see what we do in episode 3. But I don't know that I teach students that I call them to a heroic journey. And that's becoming kind of clear through our conversation. I think you sort of do, is my gut feeling. And I think that'd be an interesting conversation to have about How to call? Yeah.
And I would say I call students to be willing to be transformed.
Yeah.
Whether I'm going to say, and it's heroic, that part I don't know.
Okay.
But I do think that that I do a pretty good job of snaring students and getting them excited about what they do, whether I'm trying to recruit them as a major or get them ready for life after graduation. Yeah, I do a pretty good job of that.
Well, I love it. And I think we should explore it some more. Sound all right?
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.